Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2021's first episode of our Destination LoRaWAN webcast series. I'm delighted to welcome you today to Accelerating Digital Transformation and Business Growth while Creating a Sustainable Future. My name is Derek Wallace, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing for the LoRa Alliance, and I will be your host today. Now, before we get into the really great content of today's webcast, I want to share with you just a couple of housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, there are multiple application engagement tools that you can use. Now, this is a really good and flexible tool. You can resize and move around the different tools wherever you want to make sure you get the most out of your desktop space. Now, if you have any questions during today's webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool, and we will answer all of your questions within the next couple of days via email. So please do know that we will capture all of your questions and we will answer them all. Now, today's slide deck will be available in the resources list, and we encourage you to download any resources or links that you may find useful. There's some other housekeeping notes and tips that are in here. I'll let you read them on your own. It's quite basic information. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go on to today's agenda. Now, as I said, we've got some really, really great content. In fact, we have three fantastic speakers, and I'm really excited for you to learn about them as individuals and also listen to the great content that they have to share. We have Andrew Grill, we have Manuela Quina Brito, and Remy Lorraine, and I'll talk a little bit about all of them later on in the show. But first, I'll give a slight review of 2020 with the LoRa Alliance, some of our key achievements. And in fact, let's just keep rolling right on to 2020 and about the LoRaWAN standard. As we know, 2020 was a chaotic year with changes back and forth to the business world, to our personal lives, a lot of uncertainty, not entirely sure what's coming next. But one thing that was continual and didn't change was that the LoRaWAN standard continued to evolve. The LoRa Alliance worked on ensuring that the LoRaWAN standard developed in these 5 areas, not only these 5, but other areas as well, to make sure that the LoRaWAN standard was ready for prime time and to support massive IoT, or IoT at scale, that is going to start happening in 2021. In fact, as Donna Moore, our CEO, has said several times, that digital transformation is being accelerated by an average of 6 years because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the LoRa Alliance with the LoRaWAN standards development in these areas wanted to make sure that ease of use was improved. Zero-touch deployment was enabled. We improved roaming capabilities within the LoRaWAN standard and obviously made security enhancements. We added more countries in 2020, 10 in fact, with more to come. So that's an overview of level of the LoRaWAN standard. But here are some of the specific technical achievements of the standard within 2020. And again, it's all about making sure that we're ready for the acceleration of massive IoT. So I'm not going to go through every one of these releases and improvements that have been made in 2020, but I'll talk about a couple of them. And again, you can have access to this information from this deck after the webinar, and also all this information is on our website as well. So in 2020, we released the LoRaWAN link layer specification 1.0.4. Really, it's all about ease of use and simplifying development, deployment, and interoperability of the LoRaWAN standard, all in one easy reference implementation guide. We've also made improvements to Class B and security within 1.0.4. And we introduced 2 regional parameters, not 1, 2, 101 and 102 that you see here. And again, it's all about ensuring that the LoRaWAN standard is ready for massive IoT scale to improve performance and network density capability within the LoRaWAN standard by the introduction of new long-range frequency hopping spread spectrum data rates. Truly exciting, really setting LoRaWAN up to be ready for massive scale in IoT. We introduced zero-touch provisioning, device provisioning via QR codes, something that has been worked on, and now utilizing our QR codes our members and their networks, as they're adding more and more devices on networks, and as you scale, that's a lot of devices, there needs to be an automated way to ensure device identification at the edge of the network up to the network server. And with our QR codes, that's exactly what happens. You can do zero-touch automatic device ID, which ensures rapid device provisioning on LoRaWAN networks. Really, really great work on the LoRaWAN standard. And then last, on this page, it's something that was just an exciting development in Italy. Now, the Italian government released and enabled LoRaWAN to operate within Italy in 2018. However, at that time, the Italian government themselves wanted more time to investigate and see the impact of LoRaWAN on the wireless communication in that spectrum to make sure that it wasn't interfering with other wireless technologies and also the Defense Department. Well, in 2020, the Italian government concluded their studies and gave us a resounding vote of confidence and said that LoRaWAN is now unlocked in Italy and open to full commercial deployment. This is absolutely going to accelerate IoT in Italy and also LoRaWAN adoption and deployment. And in fact, you can learn much more about this topic in our Accelerating LoRaWAN in Italy Destination LoRaWAN session that's next week. It is the first country stop for Destination LoRaWAN in 2021. It will be in Italian for the Italian market, but the rest of us around the world will be able to enjoy the content of the webcast and learn about the really great work that's being done in Italy with LoRaWAN, because we will follow that webcast up with English and other language subtitles, so all of us can benefit from that webcast. So that's some of the technical achievements with LoRaWAN in 2020. And now on to the marketing highlights. Now, 2020 was, again, a year of massive change. Not going to go into that much, but it did necessitate the LoRa Alliance to really speed up the transition that we were already planning to go from a very heavy live events-based marketing to a much more digital marketing focus. And this page just highlights some of the activities that we did in 2020. And what's also important is it's 2020, great content that you see here is really setting us up for just a lot of great changes and much more content that's going to be delivered to the market in 2021. So we had 17 webinars in 2020, more than we've ever done before. Already in January 2021, we're going to have 3 webinars, 130 use cases, promoting our member solutions, showing the world our different members globally and their solutions, enabling IoT use cases globally. 7 white papers were produced in 2020. Already in January 2021, we're expecting to produce 3 white papers. We had 2 major campaigns that we ran, LoRaWAN for Good and COVID-19, where our members stepped up to answer the call of governments around the world looking for technology help to fight COVID-19. Now, the LoRaWAN for Good campaign was created in support of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And when Manuela speaks later on about sustainability and equality throughout the world, she's going to reference the Sustainable Development Goals in her speech. It's really good to see other tangible examples of the campaign that we ran in 2020. And also, we introduced Destination LoRaWAN, our year-long webcast, of which you are now participating in our first webcast of 2020. And we're planning to run about 30 webcasts. So there's lots of great content. We'll be touching you almost every week, and I'm really excited about the transformation and the continuous marketing engagement that we are doing in 2021. As I said, 2020 was the beginning of our journey for continuous market engagement via digital marketing. And this slide here is just an example of the transformation that we're doing on our website and within our marketing to provide rich content throughout the year. This is our vertical market section of our website. Has lots of great information. It was completely transformed in 2020 thanks to the work of Ann Van Gemmert on my team and others, really bringing and showcasing all the great work, use cases, videos, and other highlights of our members' solutions in the different verticals. And there's going to be so much more of that in 2021. Now, everything that I just talked about was really just a taste, just the highlights of 2020 that I shared with you from the different technical and marketing achievements. Now, I'm really I'm really happy to introduce to you all our 2020 end of year report. And in fact, all of you on this webcast, you are the first people in the world that will have access to this report. You can download it in the resources list here. There's a link for you. And you can see all the great work that you see in the table of contents here on the right about the power of LoRaWAN and the work that the LoRa Alliance did in 2020. Lots of great information, including the introduction of a new video, Introduction to LoRaWAN, which you can see here called Smart Businesses Use LoRaWAN. So download that video, take a look at it, download the report, take a look at it, and then share with the world. And with that, I am now extremely happy to introduce to you our first guest speaker for today's Destination LoRaWAN webcast, Andrew Grill, a practical futurist. Now, what's a practical futurist? Well, let me tell you a little bit about Andrew. So Andrew, as I said, he's a practical futurist and former IBM Global Managing Partner. He is a very popular and sought after keynote speaker and trusted board level technology advisor. The LoRa Alliance, we are just thrilled that Andrew is speaking to lead off our 2021 Destination LoRaWAN webcast series. Now, unlike traditional futurists who paint a picture of the future in 10, 20, or even 50 years from now, Andrew delivers practical and immediately actionable insights on all his speaking sessions. He goes 100% digital, especially during the COVID-19 world that we live in today, because he believes that in order to get digital, you need to be digital yourself. He does many engaging keynotes, and again, they're all about providing actionable insights on how to achieve corporate goals on a global and long-lasting scale. Now, though Andrew is very much digitally focused now in a pre- and post-COVID world, he speaks all over the world. In fact, he's spoken in over 40 countries, and he's worked with some well-known companies. I'm just going to give you a taste of some of these companies: DHL, Nike, Nestle, Barclays, Vodafone, Mars, Thomson Reuters, Royal London, KPMG, British Airways, the UK government, American Airlines, Shell. I mean, it's a ton of companies that he's spoken to, and he does it because he's quite good and well sought after. So to learn more about Andrew's background, because this is just scratching the surface, go ahead and go to https://andrew.london. And again, his contact details is in this deck, so you can learn much more about him. And with that, I'm going to introduce and hand it over to Andrew to talk about IoT's role in driving business while recovering from the financial impact of COVID-19. Andrew, over to you.
Well, Derek, thank you very much for your kind introduction, and thank you to the LoRa Alliance for inviting me today to speak about a topic which I think will be very interesting for multiple audiences, that is IoT's role in driving business while recovering from the financial impacts of COVID-19. I've been a futurist for a number of years, and the IoT opportunity is something that I think has huge potential. And what we've seen in 2019, 2020 is the impacts of this devastating pandemic. But I think where there's disruption, there is huge opportunity for change. And I talk a lot about digital disruption, but the last year or so, we've really been talking about disruption through the pandemic. So I think you'd all agree the last 10 months have actually accelerated everything. We've had decisions made that we would never make in months, let alone days, about working from home. Barriers have been broken. Decisions have been made more agile. So I think there's a lot to learn. There's a great quote from the CEO of the National Australia Bank that said, "COVID sped up the digital banking revolution in 10 weeks, not 5 years." As a retail bank, they want to encourage people to interact with them online because the cost of serving through a physical presence is quite expensive. And he would never have imagined in 10 years that he would be able to move people in a matter of months into a digital interaction. A lot of times people ask me, well, what does this change that we've gone through mean for the workforce of the future? And I want to spend a few moments talking about that because I think the change in the work environment will actually have a profound impact on how we actually deploy IoT devices, especially in the built environment, but in manufacturing, in commercial property, those sorts of areas. I think there are huge opportunities in this space that we can actually look at. I think it's fair to say we've all been partaking in the global work from home experiment, not one that we actually wanted to be involved in. And it really has been about moving us from the kitchen table, hopefully back into the office environment. But it doesn't mean that we'll actually go back to the place that we've always been. I think we'll actually start to see the emergence of what I call the third place. Now, this is not new. Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, wanted Starbucks to become the third place. He wanted people to come into Starbucks to get work done, to have conversations, to create a community. I think what we'll see, though, is the third place will actually start evolving in places that we may not expect. Libraries may start to transition to have areas where there is co-working and talking aloud. We may see supermarkets that don't need as many aisles and shelf space because people are ordering online, are starting to perhaps change their layout to allow co-working space. In fact, here in London, the Westfield shopping centre had one of their tenants, House of Fraser, move out because they hit financial difficulties. And they've been looking at how they might actually be able to repurpose that space and actually have co-working space. But it's interesting when we look at how people have reacted to that time at home. There's an interesting quote I saw on LinkedIn from Victoria White, who works at Virgin Atlantic. And she's based here in London, and she looked at what it was like after the first lockdown, going back to work after 5 or so months of being at home. And she said she spent 3 hours travelling, which was annoying. She had to get ready and do all the things that people do when they're preparing to go to work. Missed seeing her daughter first thing she woke up, had an awful sandwich, didn't see her husband. But the last thing's really interesting. She basically says that going to the office can't be something I do just because. There has to be purpose in going into work. And when I talk about the future of work, I talk about the 3 Ps: people, place, and purpose. People, because we need the right people to actually get the job done, and we need to hire the right people and retain them. Place, we've talked about the third place and where we might actually be going to work, whether it be the kitchen table because we work from home a few days a week, whether we actually end up going back to that office space that we remember from 2019, or that third place that might be somewhere in the middle. And I've written a lot about this, and I'd be interested in people's feedback as to whether they think that is actually really viable. But the third P is purpose. And back to Victoria's comment, what is the purpose of going to work? I've heard anecdotally from friends and friends of friends when they're saying, I'm really challenged about why I would spend all this time going into work when I know I can get my job done easily from my home office. But the IoT opportunity more broadly, I think, is really, really exciting. As a futurist, I've been studying numerous technologies over the year. I'm a technologist, so I like playing with technology. And several years ago, when I started looking more deeply into IoT, I wanted to understand why it is that it's going to be such a transformational technology. And I think that the very reason you've tuned into this webcast is you're either involved in IoT deployments or the IoT ecosystem. And I want to give you some practical tips and tricks. I'm a practical futurist, by the way. I want to give you some practical things that you can go and take away tomorrow, next week, and actually put into play. But when we look at why IoT has huge promise, I want to break it up into sort of 4 quadrants. First of all, cloud computing. Over the last few years, the cost of cloud computing has gone down and the speed and scalability of cloud has gone up. So now you can start to capture data from all these different devices at very reasonable cost. Secondly is sensors and connectivity. The quality and the nature of the sensors has improved. We've got better connectivity, obviously through LoRaWAN and those other type of networks, but they're now low cost and have long battery life. So it's now reasonable to start deploying sensors in mass volumes, and so that's now, IoT is now making it real. The third thing is business models. I mean, now we've got, even before the pandemic, razor-thin business models. Think about people that have service offices, having all that long lease space and having to sweat those assets. And so now business models are so tight, you need to have a return on that investment. And I think what we'll see even post-pandemic is those people that have commercial office space will need to know how their building is performing, which means they will need to instrument every nook and cranny of that building to understand how it's performing. And it might even be that people that actually look at the returns on these investments might start looking at IoT-type data to see how that building's performing. And the fourth area is the society and culture. Think about what millennials and Gen Z are expecting. They want to have purpose as well when they go to work, and they're very environmentally conscious. And so they expect they're going to have a better experience when they get to work. And so sensing the built environment, sensing where they're at work can be very important. I've heard anecdotally here in London, there was a company that started to measure the carbon dioxide levels in the office. And they found that the levels were higher than they expected, and people were getting sleepy. And if you know that, you can start to take action. Speaking of action, how do you put IoT into action? Again, many of you on this webinar will already be deploying these solutions, but I want to sort of break it down and maybe give you some ammunition where you're going to someone to get a business case approved, where you can actually say, this is why we actually need to do this. First of all, we've got to acquire the data. And clearly, we know about LoRaWAN and how sensors can be deployed out there, but how are we actually going to acquire the data? Where are we going to put sensors, whether they be fixed or mobile, and actually understand how are we going to actually get the data back. We then have to analyze the data, and you'll see a thread throughout my talk that data is very important. And with things like IoT, when you're going to massively scale up the acquisition of data, how do you actually start to treat that and analyze that? That's something you need to think about. But also acting on the data. You're capturing data that probably was not previously available, and are you just observing the data, or are you actually acting on it? It's all very well to have a wall of screens telling you what the temperature or the carbon dioxide is in your office, but are you actually able to take some action, whether it be a human being making a control decision, or business intelligence or AI actually kicking in and saying, we actually need to change some parameters to bring something down to where it needs to be. But business transformation, one of the things I want to talk about today, is something that can be really, really effective if you deploy IoT in the right way. But how do you affect business transformation with IoT? Well, you've got a lot of real-time data, and the timeliness of data is so important. And the fact that you can now get back data in real time about what's happening around you or in various areas is something that we've never really been able to do quite easily in the previous periods. We've also got location awareness, so we know what the environment is doing, but where is that happening? Is it a specific part of a warehouse? Is it on a truck? Is it someone that's come within 2 meters of someone for more than 15 minutes and exposed to a potential COVID experience? And also the environmental context. Where is it that this actual data is coming from, and what is happening around you at the same time? I think when you bring all these forces together, the timeliness of data, the location awareness, and the environmental context gives you a new level of business performance. You have new levers to pull in your business that you probably never had before as well. So the question becomes, how will IoT accelerate transformation? I think going back to my quadrants before, the first thing is we've got more powerful computing. We can actually sense things much faster, and we can collect the data in a much more timely manner. And you don't have to worry about disk storage. I mean, in the cloud, it basically is elastic. It keeps expanding. And if you've been trying Google Cloud and Azure and AWS and those sort of platforms, I'd encourage you to see what those platforms can do and how you can massively scale your deployments. Connectivity is key, and of course, this is where LoRaWAN comes in. As a former radio engineer, I acutely understand the opportunity and also the challenges of getting data back from the field. And the fact that you've got a standards-based system, the fact you don't need to go and talk to IT and start connecting into Wi-Fi networks and those sort of things, the fact that you've got wide area coverage because of the nature of LoRaWAN is a really exciting concept. And being able to get that data back, aggregate it, and get it to the people that need it and the systems that need it, I think is a very, very exciting time. We're also going to see better analytics and AI. And as I said, once you've got the data, what do you do with it? And so you need to not just have it on a screen, you need to be able to say, what am I going to do with it? And as artificial intelligence gets more and more involved, we're going to have obviously things like digital twins, where we can start to feed back what's going on in the environment and make those changes in real time. So again, think about what you're measuring, think about the data and what you're going to do with the data. Are you going to observe, or are you going to act? And one of the things I think IoT has huge promise in is that you can have data collection anywhere, anytime, and pretty much on anything. And this is something that we haven't seen until fairly recently with this technology. I'm sure any of you that are trying to explain what IoT is to your friends and family will talk about Alexa and those sort of things. But I've started to augment everything in my home office. So lighting control, temperature control, measuring temperature. I play with this technology to see what it is that I can measure. But more importantly, what can I do with the data, either personally or actually have automation to make things more comfortable. Because I really think we're going to have the internet of anything. And I think we're only at the surface of dreaming up opportunities to augment things to then drive change in our environment. But the question becomes, how do we transform? How do we use IoT? How do we use this data to transform our business, especially post-COVID, because we've had lots and lots of disruption that has massively changed our business model and changed the way that we work and play. But there's an old adage, just because you can measure something doesn't mean that you should. Don't just slap sensors on everything and hope you get useful data. You need to plan what you need to measure. And you might actually have the data already. Some years ago, I was doing some work with a transport company, and I was doing a round table. We had 15 or so tables, and we were giving them the exam question of what data do you already have? What data would you like to get, and how could you get it? And IoT is one way of doing that. But you may have streams of data you don't even know you have access to. And one term you're probably going to hear a lot about is API, or Application Programming Interface. The ability to connect into other systems to pull data in from other things, not just sensors, but also other networks and platforms. But what is your business objective? If you're going to do any sort of business transformation, let alone using IoT, what is your objective? Is it efficiency? Is it revenue growth? Is it customer engagement? You've now got with IoT new data-driven products and services that you can start to deploy to meet all those business objectives. But I want to give you a few other things to think about that maybe you've got on the table, but maybe I can challenge your thinking. Who owns the data? Just because you have a sensor in a warehouse or in the trunk of a cab of a truck doesn't mean that you own the data coming back. It might be there are laws around GDPR or data protection that stop you from grabbing that data. But actually, do you have the rights to use that data as the first party? But if you send that data down the line through an API or through another platform, do you have the rights to send that data down the stream? I talked before about building owners, and they may have sensors all throughout the building, but it might be that the law firm on level 15 doesn't want the tenant or the landlord to know when people are in the office. They want to have that data that is controlled in their own environment. So think about who owns the data. And think about your data models when the data is being collected. Is there some sort of tag or flag to show who owns that data, and then downstream you can actually advise people on whether they can use the data or not? Who owns the device? Again, just because you put a device in a particular environment, have you leased that? Have you bought it? Can you actually allow data ownership of the physical device to be something that you control or someone else controls as well? But more importantly, are you data ready? Back to my adage of just because you can measure doesn't mean that you should. Are you able to collect all this data, let alone in a cloud platform, but actually do something with it? If you don't have the ability to act and analyze that data, then you shouldn't be collecting it. Think about, back to my transport company example, what data do you have, what data do you need, and how can you actually get it? So as a futurist, I want to sort of fast forward and maybe look at what IoT is going to look like in 4 or 5 years, where we might be. And every futurist deploys a number of things in their toolkit. I like to use Gartner's hype cycle. And I was looking for a hype cycle that involved IoT, and I found one for the supply chain and logistics sector. And the way the hype cycle works, you can see this big peak here. This is the peak of inflated expectations, where it's at peak hype. For example, Bitcoin will probably be there on some other graphs. You've then got the trough of disillusionment, where basically people get quite despondent. And unfortunately, right now, the Internet of Things is right there. People are saying it has promise, but we're not sure how to make money out of this. But like everything else on this chart, it will move to the right. We'll start to see that you have the slope of enlightenment and then obviously the plateau of productivity. And I think by 2025, we'll have a lot more use cases, and then data will be measured and acted on in much more efficient ways, that IoT will just be something that you have to have involved in your business. But I want you to imagine a world where data is open. Now, here in the UK, the Lord Mayor, some years ago, started to open up transport data. A lot of the buses here in London have GPS receivers, and they send back in real time where buses are. And so the Mayor decided quite smartly to make this data open. And so companies like Citymapper have now started to add this data and Google into their prediction models. And I can actually go to a multitude of apps to see when my bus is due. And you also seen in the banking area with here in the EU, PSD2 or open banking has been mandated by many banks. They've basically said, we need you to have your data to be open so you can transport it between different platforms. But I think we'll start to see things beyond open banking. We'll have open everything. We'll have open utilities, open property, open retail. So back to my query about who owns the data, assuming that eventually you're either going to be regulated or it'll be a commercial decision to start sharing this data with other people. People that can process this data in a far smarter way than you can, because that's what they do really well. And they'll send it back to you as enriched data. And have open APIs to be able to transit that data between different companies and platforms will be very interesting. But as we've seen in the banking sector, you may be regulated to actually have that data available to third parties. So prepare for that. Some of your data may be really, really valuable. Some of it might be proprietary, but you can ascribe a value to that piece of data. Back to my example of the building where there's a law firm on the top floor, the landlord wants to know occupancy levels because then they can work out how they do the heating and lighting. And so it might be that having open APIs, you can say to the law firm, I know you don't want us to know when people are in your building, but if you give us access to that data in an open way, we can enrich it and we can give you a better experience and turn the heating and lighting on when we need to and actually have a building that's more efficient. So there are real opportunities in open data. But it is all about the data. And so my thinking through this whole talk has been, you need to be data ready, you need to be prepared for the onslaught, the tsunami of data that you'll actually be able to harvest, but also act on it. Now, I've seen some really interesting, innovative things in the last 12 months around IoT, and I want to share one example with you because it's almost a Trojan horse. And the problem is contact tracing. And so here in the UK, where I am based in London, the National Health Service, the NHS, has encouraged people, as they have in many health authorities in many countries have, to download an app. And the app on my phone, the way it works is if I'm near someone that has tested positive for COVID and I have an exposure event, I'm within 15 meters or 6 feet of them for a period of time, then I might be exposed to COVID. That works really well in an office environment or where you have a smartphone, but what about where you're in a factory or a warehouse or a mining site? You're not allowed to take a mobile on-site or a hospital. And so there are really smart ways, and one of the member companies, LoRaWAN member companies, MicroShare, that I've been doing some work with, have actually developed a really smart way of doing contact tracing. And you can see some ways here. The employee would actually wear a low-power Bluetooth device. You'd have Bluetooth sensors all connected through LoRaWAN around the specific area, and then you could detect if they had been within 6 feet of someone for an exposure period of, say, 10 minutes. It means that you're not using mobile phones, no personal information is captured. You can actually use LoRaWAN to connect it all together. But this could be a Trojan horse, because if you're able to then get essential workers back into those areas where they're needed, then companies might say, well, what else can you instrument? What else can we measure in the factory, in the mining site, in the hospital? And so it could be an opportunity to be a bit of a Trojan horse. But one thing I encourage everyone to do, no matter whether they're involved in IoT or AI or any part of the business, is to become more digitally curious. What do I mean by that? When I started hearing about IoT as a technology and a platform, I went and bought an IoT kit because I wanted to see how it worked. I wanted to understand from first principles what it was, if I could measure something with a sensor and then get it back to an app. Oh, I see, and now I can take decisions because that device can be physically removed from where I am. I've had a mantra for the last 30 years, that is, to get digital, you need to be digital. And by that I mean you need to play with this technology. If as an executive, as a senior business leader, you understand personally the technology, you're more able to understand how it works, you're more able to express the business benefit to some of your people that may be involved in providing funding or not to your next project. So I want all of you to get out your cell phones, because the next slide I'm going to put up has become my most photographed slide over the last 3 or 4 years. I call it the scary slide. Basically, the words and phrases on this screen, a bunch of jargon. And what I would normally say in my talks is that the things on this screen will impact your business in 18 months. I think now, though, the words on this screen will impact your business in under 8 months. And you might say to me, Andrew, I don't know what some of these words mean. Here's some homework for you. After the webinar, tonight, tomorrow, go to Wikipedia, type in the phrase, understand what it means and what it means for your business. And it might be you don't need to worry about it, but it might be that you do. And so by being digitally curious, you're going to start to understand all this tech that keeps being thrown at you. And I think that's really, really important. But often people say, you know, Andrew, there's so much you talk about, you've given me so many things to think about, I just don't have the team that can bring this all together. Well, actually you do. Because I think in every organization you actually have two tribes. The first tribe are the going digital. Many of you might be on the webinar today. You are seasoned executives. You know how to get a business case approved, how to present to a board, but your digital skills are still developing. The second tribe are the born digital. Their first toy was an iPhone. They live and breathe digital. They know how these platforms work and they're hungry to understand them. The two tribes need each other. And by bringing the two tribes together, you can actually have a very, very smart discussion because the going digital can learn from the born digital about how they think, and the born digital have a voice. Those crazy ideas they wish someone would listen to, actually they can be heard and they can think in a different way. And one of the best ways of bringing this to life is with a hackathon, be it virtual or in person. Hackathons have been around for a while. Companies like Google and Facebook use them to develop new products. It's where the two tribes come together and you're given a series of business problems and you're given hours, sometimes days to solve them, and no answer is wrong. And what it does, as I've said, it allows the going digital to see how the young leaders, the born digital, think, and the born digital have a voice. They finally can get their ideas up to senior management, and it can be a really exciting and entrepreneurial way to get some of these things solved. And frankly, it's actually a really good way of setting aside all the different processes and hierarchy you have in your organization and cutting through and solving some real business problems in a very, very short space of time. So consider having a hackathon, be it physical or virtual, to actually help solve some of those business problems. So I've covered a lot in the last 20 minutes, and you're probably saying, Andrew, I feel like I've been in a whirlpool. You've mentioned so many things. You've challenged my thinking here. You've said that I need to go and do some homework. You've actually made me think about some of the things that have been bugging me for a while. So what are the sort of 5 key takeaways that I want you to think about post this webinar? First of all, number 1 is audit your existing data. What data do you have today? Either data that's in a system somewhere, data that's actually around and you could actually measure and augment it. And then what data do you need to make better business decisions? Second thing is plan for new data sources, not just in terms of storage, where you're going to put it, but about business models and business decisions. If you have better, more timely data about how your business is performing, what can you do with that? And back to my very early thought about disruption from the pandemic. We had to make really quick business decisions. I heard of one bank here in London that went from 50,000 people in an office one day to the next week, everyone working from home. I'm sure they had a lot of work from home pilots and people kept saying, can I work from home 3 or 4 days a week? And it's like, we haven't worked out how to do it. But overnight, they had to work it out. So assume you're going to have lots of data and plan for that and see how you can actually use that to transform your business. What do you need to measure? In order to transform your business and have better customer experience or better intelligence about what your business and your employees are doing, what do you actually need to measure and how can you do that? And what can we do with the data? How can we make real-time business decisions? Don't just observe the data, do something with it. And can you do that in an automatic or an augmented way? So the data comes in and a business intelligence system or an AI system or machine learning actually makes decisions for you. Now, if we looked into 2025 and we were having this discussion again, we'd see some really, really innovative ways that IoT data is being used to make better business decisions and make our lives easier. And the 5th takeaway is start your transformation journey now. Don't say, oh, it's on the docket for something we might do this year. No, actually start planning it now. And maybe use this talk to help encourage your senior managers to answer those questions. If they don't know what they're going to do with this data, if they don't know how the business is performing, how can they possibly make better informed business decisions? But more importantly, what is your personal call to action? what are you going to do as a result of my talk today? Are you going to go and investigate some of those things on the scary slide? Are you going to look at the different types of data that you have or you need and really question what is your business transformation? Because if you personally get involved in this, if you're more digitally curious, as I'm encouraging you to be, then you'll actually be better informed. Now, if you'd like to know more about what I talk about, you can go to futurist.london. I also have a podcast which talks about the future of ... So IoT is one thing I cover, AI, all sorts of things are there. It might be something you might listen to as well. But I think IoT has a huge, huge opportunity. And the LoRa Alliance and LoRaWAN as a technology has a very, very important part to play in the development of IoT. So thank you for having me on the first of your LoRaWAN destination events. I look forward to what IoT brings to you in 2021 and beyond, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for that great presentation. Very timely given what's going on in the world, and should be of very much benefit to all our listeners today. Now, Andrew's talk was about the business side of LoRaWAN and IoT and how it can make a difference in the world. However, the LoRa Alliance also very much believes in sustainability and equality around the world. And because of that, I am just thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Manuela Cunha Brito of Good Tech Lab. Manuela is the co-founder of Good Tech Lab, where she explores how technology and system entrepreneurship can serve as leverage points to reduce inequalities and reverse climate change. She co-authored The Frontiers of Impact Tech, a 220-page publication based on over 400 interviews with innovators from 30 countries. It's about how the emerging impact tech sector can help to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, before discovering the potential of tech and science to tackle the world's biggest challenges, Manuela worked for many years as a project manager in the social sector. She loves to speak about her work and convince more people to harness tech and science to secure a better future for humanity. Manuela is Brazilian, and she holds a master's degree in international development from Sciences Po, Paris. And the LoRa Alliance, as I said, very much believes in sustainability and equality, and I am very, very happy to introduce you all and hand over to Manuela. Manuela, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Manuela. I'm the co-founder of Good Tech Lab, and I'm very happy to speak with you today. January is this time of the year when we generally renew hopes and plan for the future. But today, we have all the more reasons to do so. Finally, 2020 came to an end. This was a crazy year when we experienced an unprecedented pandemic, a global lockdown which hit everyone and everywhere around the globe. While we still grieve the many lives we lost, we should also be able to celebrate our strength and resilience as a society. However, it's not time to relax and lay back though. Quite the opposite. It's time to renew our efforts and put all hands on deck to face an even bigger challenge. Climate change. Last year, climate and environmental risks were among the biggest for the global economy, according to the World Economic Forum. Also, the Climate Impact Lab pointed that the mortality risks from climate change would be an order of magnitude larger than what was previously expected. In the worst scenarios, by the end of the century, the death rate due to temperature rise alone could be higher than the current rates for all infectious diseases combined. And we must not forget how climate change and inequality are deeply intertwined. While the richest people and countries are responsible for most greenhouse gases emissions, those who will end up suffering the most from global warming are the ones who are already in the poorer and more vulnerable conditions. High temperatures in the tropics, drought, and other extreme events are particularly challenging when your capability to adapt is limited. And this is why we should really focus on climate justice. We already started facing some of these extreme events, from forests on fire to extreme heat waves, unusual cold winter, and ocean acidification. We are dangerously approaching tipping points, after which change is irreversible. Another sadly irreversible and catastrophic consequence of human impact on this planet is the collapse of biodiversity. According to the landmark IPBES report, humans are driving 1 million species to extinction. We must bend history in the right direction and reverse this warming trajectory. For that, we need to halve emissions every decade until 2050, while significantly increasing carbon sinks. That means removing 54 gigatons of global greenhouse gases to become net zero, which demands exponential change in key sectors like energy, agriculture, building, transportation, and so on. And we must be capable of reducing all those emissions while at the same time improving well-being for billions of people across the world, many of whom still have lack access to basic resources like clean water, affordable energy, nutritious food, and quality education. We must leave no one behind, as the United Nations says. The 2030 Agenda, defined by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs, are the key priorities for our decade. This is the decade of delivery. We only have 10 years left, so we have to act very fast. And for that, we will need policy, behavior change, and technology. We have to act on those 3 pillars at the same time, using all the tools at our disposal. In my work, I decided to focus on the latter. Or, how can we harness technology to create impact at scale? I'm not talking here about the responsibility of just minimizing the harm for society, but rather about the intentional use of technology to really benefit people and the planet. My team dedicated 2 years to mapping examples of technologies tackling the Sustainable Development Goals, and we found over 500 super exciting examples around the world. Today, I will provide 7 examples of how technology, and more specifically IoT, Internet of Things, can really help us achieve global goals and ensure a better future for humanity. Let's start with biodiversity. The Shadowview Foundation has been using LoRa equipment to prevent the extinction of rhinos in Tanzania. More IoT could also be used to keep track of endangered species and ensure they are protected worldwide. Interestingly, IoT can also be used to track the most widespread large mammals in the world, domesticated cattle. ChipSafer is using IoT to detect anomalies in cattle behavior and prevent disease outbreaks. In the future, we could also use IoT to ensure cattle are treated under better and more sustainable conditions. For instance, in areas which are not linked to deforestation, which is quite common when we think about Brazil and the Amazon region. Well, now let's talk about sustainable production and consumption. IoT is enabling industries to digitize their supply chain. Product traceability can increase sustainability and also enable a more circular economy, where waste is no longer part of the system. Increasing reusable packaging goods, allowing better interaction with consumers, could help companies track their emissions and environmental footprint. Companies like everything are just doing that. It would also allow us to ensure that everyone is paying a fair price and help consumers make better and more sustainable choices. The third example I want to give is the use of IoT to improve water access, ensure water quality, and prevent waste. In Africa, SweetSense is using IoT to ensure that the pumps are working properly in rural areas. If it detects a problem, it sends a signal to inform managers and help them repair the pumps way more quickly than they used to. IoT can also be used to prevent water leak. Edge Solutions, for instance, is doing that. It can also be used to offer remote measuring and monitoring of wastewater and groundwater systems. It can increase effectiveness, address shortages, and alert about flood risks. IoT can also control irrigation, therefore helping agricultural communities to save more money while also reducing the water that we need to produce the food. The fourth example is that IoT can help decarbonize transportation. From micromobility, for instance, by facilitating pay-as-you-go bike rentings, to enabling the connection between the electric vehicles and the grid. which is key when we think about decarbonizing the whole transportation sector. EVs are definitely going to grow, and being able to control the demand and the peaks in the right time would be key to make that happen. The fifth example is around building and infrastructure. I'm going to talk here specifically about energy consumption in the building, where sensors, specifically if combined with AI, can help define the real needs for lighting, heating, or cooling areas. Data can help optimize more strategic decisions for energy consumption and save costs, while also reducing the carbon footprint. IoT is also already helping farmers to analyze the soil and produce crops using less inputs like fertilizer or water. Teralytic, for instance, is just playing this field. We can also think about drones and satellites, which are being used to provide aerial views of forests and ensuring transparency in the carbon markets. So would it be possible to actually combine that type of technology with LoRa technology to have a more granular information about the exact amount of CO2 that is captured in the soil? In the future, could we also think of the use of IoT to analyze and monitor greenhouse gas emissions? For instance, to help better monitor what is coming out of certain industries. Last year, a new coalition led by Al Gore was launched to use satellite imagery and AI to produce real-time monitoring of emissions. Maybe we could imagine IoT providing a finer and more granular level in areas where there are a lot of emissions happening already. Also, we know from the IPCC that reducing emissions alone is no longer enough. To keep the global warming under 2, let alone 1.5 degrees, the only way would be to also take carbon out of the atmosphere. The world will need to reach at least 10 to 20 annual gigatons of negative emissions by mid-century to cancel remaining emissions from hard-to-abate sectors and some of our historical emissions as well. IoT could play then a role in the monitoring of the many carbon captures and sequestration facilities, including making sure that the CO2 does not leak from geological reservoirs, more or less as it's already being done to control the leak of radiation in power plants. Well, all those examples are definitely super exciting, but I'm not here to say that technology alone will save the world. It's not just some magic silver bullet. And besides, it can also bring along a new set of challenges, even when the intention behind it is positive. Just think about all the e-waste or the old sensors that are now unused when the intention behind them was to really create a smarter city. But still, I'm convinced that it is a very important tool, technology. It's a key element in our toolbox. And we must use all the tools at hand if you want to achieve a climate-just world by the end of the decade. We have many reasons to believe that this is the decade of climate tech. Technology is maturing. Talent is increasingly looking for more responsible and purpose-driven companies. And we are also seeing more and more capital directed towards the global goals. The market opportunity for sustainable development goals solutions by 2030 is estimated at about $12 trillion annually. The wealth creation from achieving net zero represents $45 trillion. So it's a huge amount of money in the game here. Leaders and investors worldwide are finally realizing that climate tech and impact tech offer great economic opportunities. From famous VCs like Sequoia to institutional investors like BlackRock to philanthropists like Prime Coalition and family offices or in corporations, they are all considering climate and environment before taking their investment decisions. There are also plenty of new possibilities for getting funding, and this would allow the sector to move faster. Yet, estimates of the annual deficit to finance the SDGs are around $2.5 trillion. So clearly, we still have a lot to do. If you're curious to see other examples of great people already playing an important role in the space, and new ideas of how you can apply technology to tackle those big global problems, I invite you to take a look at the free report that we published with Good Tech Lab, where we mapped over 500 startups across the globe, tackling the SDGs, including using very different tools like biotechnology, AI, hardware, software, and a lot more. And if you're particularly interested in climate tech, I suggest you take a look at the ClimateScape platform, with whom we are now launching a new collaboration this year. The challenges for 2021 are enormous, but I'm certain that our collective desire and ability to act right now will help us to overcome them. I'm positive that by working together, we will achieve a better future for humanity and every living being on Earth. Let's start right now, shall we? Thank you, and I wish an exciting year to all of us.
Thank you very much, Manuela, and what a great presentation. And what's really interesting, at least from the LoRa Alliance perspective and LoRaWAN perspective, is that of the many different areas that she talked about, LoRaWAN today, by our members around the world, are enabling so many of those use cases in the different areas that it's great to see, and there's so much more to come. And in fact, you can learn more about that and see more examples of LoRaWAN serving the needs of a sustainable planet by looking at our Power of LoRaWAN video, which has a lot of really good examples of use cases of LoRaWAN and a sustainable planet. Now with that, our last speaker, definitely not least, but I'm so happy to introduce Remy Lorraine to all of you today. Now, Remy is a Global LoRaWAN Networks Director at Semtech, and he's been doing that since 2017. And he enables LoRaWAN operator footprint expansion worldwide while supporting business case increase. Now, for the LoRa Alliance, Remy does so many things for us, and we're so thankful for him. In fact, he's so active and so influential in the Alliance by the tireless work that he does that our nickname for Remy affectionately is the Beast. So in the LoRa Alliance, Remy is the chair of the Network Operator Forum. He also is the vice chair for the EMEA work group, which aims to foster LoRaWAN business throughout EMEA. He also is the sponsor for our Wireless Broadband Alliance. He's our liaison for them, promoting the Wi-Fi and LoRaWAN together. And in fact, we just recently produced a white paper on Wi-Fi and LoRaWAN serving the needs of IoT. And Remy from the LoRa Alliance side led that charge. In fact, it's the second of 2 white papers that Remy led the charge of. Remy received his engineering degree from Telecom Paris Tech and a Master's of Computer Science from Paris Orsay University, as well as Business Communication Leadership degree from NC. Remy does so much for us. I'm so thankful. And now I'm going to introduce and hand over to Remy to talk about LoRaWAN roaming across the EU. Remy, over to you.
Thank you, Derek, for handing over to me. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on the time zone. I am Remy Lorrain, in charge of LoRaWAN network development at Semtech and sharing the operator and EMEA members community in Europe and Middle East Africa at the LoRa Alliance. Today, I will be pleased to give an update on the LoRaWAN roaming. As you can see on the LoRaWAN global footprint map that you can find on our website, the LoRaWAN networks deliver today a unique coverage opportunity in 162 countries where we find private and public deployments. LoRaWAN ecosystem can also rely on 148 public operators with a significant coverage in many countries. Imagine 1 second that we could aggregate this unique global coverage. It would bring the largest massive IoT network ever built on the market. Of course, the best way to aggregate LoRaWAN network coverage is to implement roaming. Any wireless standard needs coverage to support the business growth, and roaming is clearly a strong driver for coverage where devices can connect multiple networks on the domestic and international market. Moreover, LoRaWAN enables terrestrial and satellite networks roaming, making this dream of the global coverage a reality. So in 2020, the LoRa Alliance decided to set up a kind of roaming booster initiative or roaming booster project named Connect Europe. The goal is to support the acceleration of roaming setup in Europe, as well as connecting over region. We launched with the members active groups on LoRaWAN roaming promotion across the ecosystem, roaming policy alignment between network providers to simplify the setup of roaming agreements, and of course, we, on a daily basis, support customer use case implementation for roaming. Our two key strategic goals are in 2021 to have 25 European countries roaming capable and start developing roaming capabilities in other regions in Asia, Middle East, Africa, and Americas. So roaming, like IoT in general, is all about adoption, right? And value for customers. We see today many market leaders coming to LoRaWAN roaming as it leverages the strength of the ground-up massive IoT standard that is LoRaWAN. LoRaWAN is agnostic to network type, and you can interconnect private and public networks seamlessly, opening the way to innovative hybrid business model. Next, LoRaWAN roaming leverages macro diversity. It's a technical word, but in a way, it increases the network reliability that a device traffic or frames can be collected by the two roaming networks at the same time. Next, LoRaWAN roaming networks can exchange new type of information as per the last LoRaWAN specification, like network-based geolocation parameters. Last but not least, terrestrial network can roam, interconnect with satellite networks when losing the coverage access. It is working today for the LoRaWAN. So today, where do we stand? The key message here is that after more than 3 years of design and test, we can say that LoRaWAN roaming is entering the scaling curve in 2021. LoRaWAN standard is available, and majority of leading network server vendors have implemented roaming capabilities. 20+ countries have today roaming capabilities based on LoRaWAN network providers, and we see an increasing customer demand on the international market. Use cases are focused on either mobile devices traveling through multiple countries or fixed devices supported by a one-stop shop deal. All devices are provisioned on one primary operator network and can be installed in any other country. It is up to the primary operator to have roaming agreements with other country network providers. It is fully transparent for the customer. That's probably the use case that we see the most today. So based on this first success, what are the next steps? Stay tuned. We will carry on the engagement with you guys, the LoRaWAN ecosystem. First, we plan Destination LoRaWAN focused on deploying and implementing LoRaWAN roaming around first quarter of 2021. More technical discussion to come. Next, you will see roaming use case promotion on the LoRa Alliance media. Then, and we will of course share and update with you the list of countries and network providers who are roaming capable on a regular basis. And if you have any question, please reach out to the LoRa Alliance and we will be more than happy to answer your questions. To conclude, LoRaWAN roaming is real and scaling today in 2021. Of course, we take the responsibility to keep you posted on a regular basis about the progress of the ecosystem, and we are pleased to support customers and network providers projects in the coming months for sure. So I suggest that we move now to the Q&A session, and thank you for your attendance and patience.
Thank you very much, Remy, for that great presentation, full of really good content. And now, as we start to wrap up our show, I want to give a special thanks to our sponsors. We could not run this year-long Destination LoRaWAN webcast series without our sponsors, nor could we enable this webcast series to be for free for the entire market without our sponsors. So our gold sponsor, Machine Q, a Comcast company. Our silver sponsors, Birds and Charter Communications. Thank you very, very much for your support. And now, if you are interested in becoming a member of the LoRa Alliance, well, I sure hope you are. So many things that we're doing. And if you are active, if your business utilizes and has LoRaWAN as part of your activities, the best way to improve the success of your LoRaWAN business is becoming a member of the LoRa Alliance with access to an amazing ecosystem, lots of marketing support, the ability to influence the specification to suit the needs of regions and your goals as well. Definitely join the LoRa Alliance. If you want to learn more about it, you can take a look at the membership benefits available in the resource list. And you can also contact me directly. I'm happy to answer any of your questions about the LoRa Alliance, talk to you about the benefits of membership. And now, I just want to say a very, very big thank you for our presenters today for taking the time to put the presentations together and to rehearse them to make sure that they're ready and then spend the time delivering to us. Thank you very much. And I want to thank my team so much for all the hard work that they've done to make this show happen, and just let you all know that today's webcast will be available probably within 24 to 48 hours after the show. You can learn more about LoRa Alliance and LoRaWAN at the LoRaAlliance.org, our website. And also remember, next week, Accelerating IoT in Italy, our first country Destination LoRaWAN webcast of 2021 in Italian. Definitely register for that. And with that, I will thank you all for participating today. I look forward to speaking and seeing you all in future webcasts in 2021. And I wish you a great day or night wherever you are in the world. Goodbye.